Hi, I'm Mehul at Microsoft TechEd 2014 in Houston, Texas with Mads Kristensen. Now Mads, you guys have shown some really cool stuff, made some big announcements with ASP.NET vNext, and you are doing a talk here on something very interesting. First of all, let's catch up a little bit. What do you own in ASP.NET?
I own all the web tooling in Visual Studio that goes along with all the editors for web forms and HTML and MVC tooling, all that sort of stuff. CSS, LESS, JSON, Sass, CoffeeScript, and BrowserLink, and Page Inspector. So a lot of the tooling that's editor or BrowserLink based, that's sort of what I'm program manager for.
Now, your talk today, what is it about?
Well, it's about all of the stuff that we're doing here, but also looking ahead in the future. So it's really important that people understand, like, where are we going and what are the things we're doing. So I bring a lot of new prototypes, never seen before kind of things, very just hot off the press. The developers back in Redmond have been working hard on some of these things, so it's going to be really interesting. And basically the idea is, well, one of the ideas, and one of the things I'm going to talk about is the concept of bring your own tools, right? So a lot of people, they prefer to sit in Sublime, and they might have Grunt and Bower and NPM to run their build process and have other tools to do minification and what that could be. There's a lot of different tools out there, node modules that Grunt uses. And so I'm going to talk about how Visual Studio can elevate that experience. So when you're using those tools from the command line, what you're doing today, if we can do something in Visual Studio that can elevate that experience, if you choose to opt in, that's going to be really interesting. We can take something that's really great today, the command line tools for Grunt, for instance, and we can make it even better with Visual Studio. But again, you decide, right? If you want to use Sublime or something else to write your ASP.NET apps, sitting on a Mac or whatever, feel free to do that. Are you on Windows? Do you like Visual Studio? You're going to get a better experience using the exact same tools. And you can opt in to whatever level you want. So the basic level is you're just using Visual Studio and you stick to the command prompt, right? And you just do whatever you do normally to execute your node and Grunt tasks and so on. But then you can opt in and say, okay, I want Visual Studio to help me here and there, and little few things here and there that in the end will make you way more productive, and it basically just runs the exact same commands under the hood that you would normally write in the console. Right. So you can go back and forth, you can figure out what you're comfortable with and go with that. So
let's back up a little bit.
Yes.
Explain real quick what Grunt is and generally how people use it.
Yeah, so Grunt is starting to become really, really interesting. So Grunt is a task runner, and so it's sort of the same thing as MS Build, right? You have tasks and targets and so on, and you can use it to build your app. And it's used primarily for client-side technologies, static HTML, CSS, LESS, Sass, where you can do minification, bundling, pre-processing, right? So you can, if you have TypeScript, for instance, you can use a Grunt task to compile your TypeScript into JavaScript. Or, if you have LESS or Sass, you use Grunt task to compile it into CSS, move files around, do a lot of these things that you potentially today either use tooling for in Visual Studio or you use through MS Build. Right. And MS Build can actually call Grunt. Right. So you can sort of also hook those things up. That's what people do today. Oh, wow. But the really cool thing about Grunt is that it gives us this layer of a lot of tasks. People out there in the world have written a lot of tasks that does really amazing things for client-side web apps. So we say that's great, right? MS Build has traditionally not been made for the client-side stack. It's more been on the server, and compiling C# and those sort of things. But with Grunt, we really have something here that is completely cross-platform. It already has a huge adoption out there in all around us, and we really want people to continue using him. If they already are today, that's great. We love those tools, and we've been working actually with not with Grunt but with Gulp. Gulp and Grunt are sort of two task runners that are very similar. They solve the same problems, but in slightly different ways, but very, very similar. And we've been working with the Gulp core contributors to sort of validate that what we're doing makes sense and all those things. So I'm very, very excited about this, because what it means is that you can have the chain of tools that you want. Like, no matter what you want to do, whatever you use today, whatever you want to use in the future, the goals for us is to say, that's cool, keep doing that. And whenever there's something we say, this has a great uptake, people are really interested in that, we want to want to elevate the experience in Visual Studio. And I'm going to show some really cool demos on how to do that in a non-frightened way. You know, it's not scary. It's basically just the tools, but we give a little bit extra. So there are some real benefits of doing that. Your productivity will go up if we get those Visual Studio hooks to light up your Grunt runner and your NPM and Bower and all these other tools. So that's sort of the way we're going now. You can jump in at any point you want, or stay completely out, and we're going to make sure you have a great experience no matter what.
Okay, I've seen the tool, what you're going to show today. We're going to put a link to your talk so others can experience it as well. Yep. It's like you basically said, right? If you're using those tools, and you can continue using them on the other platforms, but in Visual Studio, you get some added benefits like, what did you show? Like the little, dialogues that are going to be polished up and so forth, right? Yeah. With the ability to have PowerShell from Visual Studio let you know if there's errors in your script.
Yeah,
I thought that was very cool.
Yeah, whenever you use all these command line tools, and it doesn't really matter which one of them. There's a disconnect between your source code and the command window itself. And it doesn't matter if you're on a Mac or a PC, if you use PowerShell, the command line, Bash, whatever your favorite shell is. But let's say that you run some commands, you run unit tests, right? Your test is going to fail. It's going to say that in the command line. It's going to say this test failed. And then you're going to say, okay, now I have to go into Visual Studio or Sublime or whatever and find that file and find that test manually. So there's a disconnect. But what if Visual Studio automatically understood the output from the console and can scrape that somehow and fill the error list, fill the test runner explorer with the filled tests, all this sort of integration, so that we get best of both worlds and we can stay in our editor where we're happy, right? So whether you run Grunt Watch, which continuously watches anything you do and run your tests, and run JS Hint and all those different tasks, they will just start to light up in Visual Studio. Like you will get squigglies in the JavaScript editor when you have a JS Hint error, right? But it all comes from Grunt. It all comes from a node module running under the hood. In the exact same way, the exact same Grunt execution that you would do normally in the console, Visual Studio can call into that in sort of a cool way that lights all this up. So it's about elevating the experience. It's about keeping you productive, happy, in the zone, stay there, don't do context switching too much. You might have several console windows open, right? And so there's a lot of alt tapping between the different windows and all that. And that's cool, that's powerful, you can do whatever you want, it's great. But we think that we can make the experience a little bit more better and a little bit more coherent, right? So stay where you're happy and most productive and get everything bubbled up to what you would expect from Visual Studio, right? So I'm really excited about the direction that we're taking here. And again, this is very new, very early. It's not really a prototype, it's actually a proof of concept that I'm showing. So it's really that early. And
but it's going to make it in there?
Yes,
okay.
It's definitely going to make it in. Whether or not it's going to look exactly like what I'm showing, I don't know. Okay. But the concepts, this is a proof of concept, so the concepts are good. They're sound, and we validated them with the Gulp team, right. And they're all for it. And so this is really, really exciting. And hopefully there's going to be a lot more. And the cool thing about this whole thing is, we might understand Grunt and Gulp. But then what about a year from now or 3 weeks from now when a new task runner comes out or new tasks or whatever? Is that possible? Everything in the chain here is completely extendable. So you can imagine a world where Visual Studio is going to have all the hooks, all the extensibility, and then Web Essentials can come in on the side and start adding all those new ones. So you get the same level of support no matter what tool you're using. And whenever there's uptake in one of these new tools that comes out, we can then roll that from Web Essentials into Visual Studio in an update later on. But we can be really, really fast through Web Essentials to get all those new features in for new tools that that was just created or is just starting to get a little bit of uptake. So that's really exciting. So we can move really fast, and that's important.
Now you mentioned direction, so let's talk a little bit about direction. What, as a person who owns tooling, making great experiences in Visual Studio, love Browser Link, what ideas are you cooking up? I mean, what's next that you would like to help web developers with? Well,
I think there is one big area that really needs some attention. And back in the day, that's 10 years ago, building websites were easy. Right? HTML, CSS, a little bit of JavaScript, done.
The good old days.
Good old days. It was sort of easy.
Yeah.
But now, everything in HTML5 and all the new JavaScript APIs, we're literally coding against an operating system in the browser, right? The browser is now an operating system with everything that makes up an operating system. So we have to think about a lot more things.
Yep.
And so that actually makes it more complex. There are now more things that the developer needs to know. On top of that, new frameworks, both for CSS and for JavaScript, comes out all the time. Some of them stick, some of them become really popular, some don't, but there's a lot there too to be aware of.
Right.
So being a web developer today is not necessarily easy. So let's say that you want to build a Bootstrap and Angular website. And if you haven't done that before, that's not necessarily the most easy thing to do. Let's say that you haven't really been building a lot of rich client applications and single page applications with full JavaScript and
if you don't necessarily have the expertise.
Yeah, exactly, that's what I mean.
Okay, you maybe not played with Bootstrap.
The barrier is pretty high.
Right.
Right. So I think that it's really, really important for us to make sure that we can, through the tooling, to lower the barrier of entry, to make it super easy to say, if you want to build an Angular app, it's just really simple. IntelliSense just flows through. You can just say file new, Angular project, add new Angular controller, all those sort of things. And this is just an example, but really lower the barrier so it doesn't become like a very expert level entry, but bring it down to almost a beginner level entry.
Regardless if it uses ASP.NET or not?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
So it's really just have a great tooling experience for developers in general.
That's it. Of course, we're not forgetting ASP.NET in this case anyway, right? So we're also looking at how can we have HTML helpers or ASP.NET helper methods or whatever that can maybe generate Angular, specific Angular things or Bootstrap controls and so on. So it makes it even easier, right? Because right now you're sitting halfway in Visual Studio, halfway online in the documentation from Angular and Bootstrap and whatever framework you use, and that's not very productive, right? So if we can eliminate that just a little bit and help you out. There are some common things that people always get wrong, and it's just part of, it's new, right? You don't necessarily understand the full frameworks. So Visual Studio can come in and help. That's going to lower the entry a lot and make it much easier. So we're going to see a lot of stuff coming. I'm showing a little bit of what it means when we target Angular and Bootstrap specifically, and how the HTML editor can light up in a way that can generate Angular controllers directly from within the HTML editor, for instance, based on your markup, and how we can have Bootstrap, make sure that Bootstrap, we follow the rules of Bootstrap with giving you good validation and help in the editor itself.
Right.
So singling out a few of these very popular frameworks and really nailing the experience for the end user so that it becomes really super easy.
Oh, very nice.
So that's just one aspect of it. It's a huge effort. Testability and all sorts of other things are also hugely important.
Yep.
But overall, it's about lowering the barrier of entry and making it really easy to build rich, beautiful, modern apps.
Very nice. Very
yes.
Nice. Now, one other story with the sort of new web out there is that you do have sort of a lot of these client-side apps, but they're still using ASP.NET on the back end, maybe Web API for or WCF for services, right? Is there a way that you guys thought about maybe helping with that, where you have to expose your data somehow? And maybe I would love it if something could scaffold for me, like an Angular front end or something. Have you thought in that direction at all?
Yes.
Oh, it's coming?
It is coming.
Awesome,
yes.
Awesome. Right.
We don't have any prototypes or anything to show yet, but yes, that is definitely coming. Like you kind of see that what we've done here in Update 2, where we have the new JSON editor with JSON schema support, and we have the new scaffolding as well, now for web forms, but it's open, so we can have Angular scaffolding, we can have any scaffolding we want using the same engine. We're even going to take that to the command line in the future as well, so you don't even need Visual Studio to do all that. If you want to sit on a Mac, for instance, right? If you want to sit on a Mac, you can still get the Visual Studio tooling through the command line. That's a goal. We're not there yet, right? But that's the goal. But that's exactly the scenario. That's one of them that you're mentioning here. Like it's too difficult to hook up an endpoint, and then you have to read the documentation of your JSON endpoint, right? Your web API, to know what are the types going back and forth and so on. And scaffolding here would help a lot. Right. So that's definitely something we're looking on. There's some part of it is web API that needs to produce some sort of description of your endpoint. Like what we're looking at right now is JSON LD, and we actually do have JSON LD support in Visual Studio now with update 2. And we actually submitted a pull request to the JSON LD W3C project for the schema that defines JSON LD, right? So we're really serious about this sort of stuff, but we don't have anything yet. But that's exactly the scenarios. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah. All right, now the stuff you're showing today, is it in update 2?
Some of it is. Some of it is the stuff I'm showing with Grunt integration and those sort of things are not. That's really just a very early prototype.
I see, okay.
What I'm going to show with Angular and Bootstrap is either in update 2 or it's in Web Essentials that's coming out later today for update 2.
Ah, okay.
Right, so we have these different trains where we deliver features, right? So for the Web Essentials, we're testing out what does it mean when we have elevated support for specific frameworks.
Nice.
Right, and we're gonna tune it in a little bit, and then we're moving it into Visual Studio. Right. So, but it's all coming, and some of it is already there. So we're getting closer and closer each day.
Excellent. All right, Mads. We'll put a link up to the video and the usual links for Twitter and all that. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks.